Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us and welcome to our 74th Med Mentor Monday panel. I know we do a lot of these. The topic for this panel is on navigating, pre-health, pre-med as a first-gen student. And we have two lovely panelists here with us today. So we can go ahead and start off with some introductions. I'll just go ahead and say like their name and what year they're in. And then we can get started with some questions.
Hi, everyone. My name's Janice. I'm a third-year medical student at UCLA. I went to UCLA for undergrad, so I've been in LA for quite a while, and I love it here. Um, and some things that I just love to do on the side are baking, and I've just started like a latte making hobby, so that's something new for me.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mario Eusebio, first-gen student. I was a community college transfer student. So I'm from the Bay Area, went to community college and Diablo Valley College and transferred over to UC Berkeley. And I am currently in MS1 and I'm in the Prime LA program.
Cool. It's nice to meet you too. I don't think we've ever been on a panel together before. Cool. Okay. And as I was telling them before the recording, I'm Martina. I'll be moderating today. And I'm also first gen, so I might answer some of these questions too. Okay, cool. So with that, we can go ahead and get started with our first question. So, as first gen students, what were some of the most significant challenges that you faced when starting your pre-health journey? This is pretty open-ended.
You want to go first, Janice? Or I unmuted myself. I'll go first. So I think one of the most significant challenges that I had starting my pre-med journey was more of financially. So all throughout community college and even undergrad, I think there was only like one semester in undergrad, I was working like at least 2 to 3 jobs to help basically fund my education and, support myself as well. And so that also carried on postgraduately. And so that was sort of one of my main barriers were financial barriers. And then if I were to, I guess, tear it off, I think the next thing which I would say is understanding the system to get to medical school as well. So those were my main barriers, I would say, as a first gen student.
I think for myself, mainly the lack of mentorship. I feel like as a first generation student, myself and many of my peers who also identify as first gen, no one in their family, no one in their network really knew the path to get to medical school or any health related career. And when you're just starting out, it's really daunting. You feel like there's a million things that you have to know, but you don't know, and you also don't know what you don't know. So I think the way that I wish I went about that was finding a mentor early on. And I think finding a mentor is also hard in itself, but when you're able to find someone who can kind of guide you through the process, someone who's been through the application process and all of that, you have that somebody to talk to, and then it'll make that process a little bit easier. So I think that was the biggest challenge that I faced.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. You don't know what you don't know. I also did not realize how much I didn't know until getting to this point. Great. So, how did your family background and expectations influence your experience as a pre-health student? Again, pretty open-ended question.
Mari, did you want to answer or for me to go?
We could go back and forth. Since I
Okay,
said first, you want to
yeah,
go
that
on?
sounds good. So I think again, kind of alluding back to the answer that I just spoke, my family background is I come from a family of immigrants from Korea. There's a lot of language barrier growing up. There's a lot of financial instability, and again, as I mentioned, lack of mentorship. just not really someone that I could lean on or talk to regarding anything regarding even starting from high school, going to college, and now in medical school. There was just nobody in my family that I could talk to. And I think that would have been such a blessing to have. And so not having the family background to kind of support you throughout this process is difficult and a challenge in itself. And I think that's what led to a lot of challenges and obstacles I faced throughout this journey. But it also, I think, forged me into somebody that I would like to think takes initiative and is creative with the resources that I seek out. I spent a lot of time networking and talking to a lot of people in college just to try to figure out what I was doing because I didn't have that family member or friend to talk to. And that kind of opened doors for me. So that was my experience.
For me, my experience was I'm a first generation immigrant, so I wasn't born here. I was actually born in the Philippines, and I immigrated to the Bay Area. So my experience is I'm the oldest. I have two younger brothers, so it was about basically carving the path, basically on my own, trying to navigate the education system here in the U.S. And to be honest with you, I was very blessed enough to have mentors. I know that Janice mentioned mentorship being important along the way that helped me along that path and provided me with guidance as well as support throughout the process, all through community college, during undergrad, and even postgraduately, that allowed me to get to where I am today.
So on this topic of mentorship, how did you find the mentors that you relied on, before med school? And do you have any advice for building meaningful relationships with potential mentors?
So for me, the way that I found mentorship was going to like networking events, but then also I found mentors in even I would say like unusual places in my hobbies. For example, I practice Filipino martial arts and Wing Chun, and you'll be surprised by how many individuals are willing to help you out if you're willing to share your story, because well, I could say it's like, if you don't ask, right, you won't receive. So it was very surprising for me, and being open and honest about where you are in your journey and being able, like I said, just to tell your story to a lot of individuals, you'll find that most individuals are more apt to help you out. Let's see. Any advice for building meaningful relationships? Yeah. What I would say is, start with who you currently have around you right now. Like if you have participated in any sort of internship programs or you worked in some places, I would highly suggest that you just start by checking in with folks, because what you'll find is that, you check into with your, professional mentors like every 2 to 3 months or even half a year. People want to know how you're doing, especially if they helped you out in the past. And so that's one of the best ways to start. And one other aspect of it is to, talk about who you are outside of your career pathway or outside of the sciences is also very helpful, just to find meaningful points of connection when you are talking with another person. That's my sort of advice for this situation.
For me, I found a lot of mentors, as Mario said, by networking. In college, I involved myself in a lot of different organizations. And through those organizations, I met a lot of peers and colleagues. And sometimes those peers and colleagues knew a lot of things that I didn't. And just by, making friends with those people and asking if they knew of any opportunities or asking if they know anybody who was looking for, let's say, a research volunteer or someone looking for project help, anything like that. I found a lot of opportunities just by talking to, my grade level or anyone else. And then the second way I found mentors was being very active in the things that I did. And so I'll give one example, I was a nursing volunteer at Reagan during the last 3 years of my college years. And I think from just the outside, when you're looking at all of the responsibilities they tell you, you can be very, I guess, idle and complacent and just do what you're told. But you can also use that opportunity and seek out doctors who are, walking around the unit, be like, hi, I'm an undergraduate student. I'm interested in pursuing medical school. Would it be all right if I followed you around or saw this procedure with you? Anything like that. I also asked nurses the same thing. I asked them if I could empty the Foley bag or watch them place the IV lines and things like that. And so just being very involved and active and kind of seeking out opportunities in places that you're already at, I think that will help you find people and build your network. And in terms of building meaningful relationships, I would suggest finding a mentor that has common ground to you. I remember I had a really close professor for a writing course that I took, and it just happened to be a topic that I was really interested in. And so by nature, I went to a lot of his office hours. We got really close. He suggested we have coffee sometimes, and we just built our relationship over that. And that was simply because I was so interested in something he was so passionate about, and that kind of open doors for us to build a meaningful relationship. So if you want something natural and wanting to build a relationship like that, maybe look for mentors with interests that align with yours.
Yeah, I totally agree. I had a lot of mentors throughout undergrad that, I mean, realistic, like honestly, they're the reason I'm here. I wouldn't be here without the mentorship that I received. But I agree that some of my like best, I guess, mentors were other students that were just a few years ahead of me. Because these are people that like were in my shoes so recently, and they were in my shoes very recently, and like they knew exactly kind of like what was coming up for me, and they were able to give me advice. And that was on anything like on classes, or like someone mentioned like, oh, there's a research spot open in my lab, and that's actually how I got involved in research to begin with. So I think meeting like upperclassmen at, sometimes organizations have like panels of recently admitted students, or like getting involved in, campus organizations, or just like fun things on campus where, you might meet other people who might also be on the pre-med track. I think upperclassmen can be really like really a really great source of mentorship. Okay. I think maybe Mario was already kind of answering this question in the Q&A, but I can pose it so we can just talk about it. So how did you balance financial constraints, work, academics, all that stuff while pursuing the pre-med path? And how did you make yourself a strong applicant while working multiple jobs, for example?
That is a very loaded and it's a good question, to be honest with you. So, at least for me, I could speak from my personal experience. What I did is I really had to develop very good time management skills, as well as prioritizing what I needed at the moment and ensuring, the first thing I always wanted to ensure is that, am I financially secure? And so I would try to prioritize like, hey, do I need the finances? So when I was picking jobs, especially when I was managing multiple jobs, I always try to choose a job that I felt would help me on my particular career path, unless I really, really needed a job. And then, that's more on that financial constraints aspect. But I think it really just depends on, one, really developing time management, because you really have to utilize your time and understand, how you are using your time and what's draining your time in that particular regard. And then as well as really prioritizing your tasks for the day. So I would basically create, a very organized schedule. I'd have like contingency plans if things didn't work out for certain things, because it really just depends on how, I mean, I know I sounds like a broken record, but those time management skills very important, especially while managing multiple jobs, and understanding that you have to be building a team around you, like when you choose jobs, about like, you know, um, having the flexibility and adaptability and being honest with the individuals that you're working with, as well. And that's how I chose my particular roles, because sometimes, you may have uh, workplaces where the constraints are very, very strict. And so I try to not try to choose those particular jobs. And, just being honest with the individuals that you're working with and letting them know, like, hey, I have like this test, or hey, I have to do this family matter. So time management and very much like prioritizing your tasks. One of the ways I say that helped me.
I'll just chime in for a second. I really agree with what Mario said about choosing the jobs that will improve any skill that you want to gain, as well as, again, connecting you with people that you may not have otherwise met. For example, I worked at a boba shop in college, and I also worked in research, and those are the two jobs that I had for quite a bit, and it was really tough to manage those along with classes. Um, but again, time management is super key, and if conflicts arise, it's just really best practice to be transparent and tell the people that you're working with very early on, so that your work ethic is not questioned. And I think even working multiple jobs, I think that in itself improves your application anyways. Anything that you do, I strongly believe that if you're a hard worker and you build communication skills and you learn anything from it, that improves your application in any angle that you see it. So I wouldn't see a job just as a financial avenue. I think it's an avenue to improve your application and improve any skills that you're hoping to gain.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I was actually going to mention that too, that you can definitely talk about all the jobs you've held, as an undergrad on your med school application. There's a section where you list out up to like 15 activities, and those activities are all categorized by like what type of activity they are, and employment is one of the categories. And you can definitely talk about your time working at the boba shop and your time like working at all these other places you've worked at. It doesn't need to be strictly a healthcare related job. Any job can go on the application, and there's definitely like skills to be learned from any job. Like the skills that you might learn, like time management is probably something you learned at a boba shop, working at a boba shop. So, that translates to almost any other aspect of your life. So don't feel like you're disadvantaging yourself as an applicant by having to work multiple jobs. It's totally common. A lot of people have to do it, and yeah, it can go on your application, and that's great. It's a good thing to talk about. Okay. Maybe one more question from this section. So what campus resources, maybe aside from mentors, did you find most valuable in supporting your pre-health journey? Was there anything you relied on aside from mentors?
Yeah, I could go first on this one. So I went to undergrad at UC Berkeley, and there was this program called the Biology Scholars Program. I would say that was the program that pretty much saved my academic career and my pre-med journey while at Cal. And then I also utilized I don't know what UCLA's version of like EOP is. And then there was also a transfer student center, but my main resource was definitely the Biology Scholars Program. I was able to find a network of peers who come from a similar background on myself, first generation coming from under-resourced communities who are interested in like pre-health and research and public health fields. I would say it's all about finding, a niche in your particular, community and where you're currently at. And like I said, it's like building a team to help support you through this particular journey.
Um, I don't know what the equivalent is at UC Berkeley, but at UCLA there is something called CSC and ASUCLA. I don't know the exact meaning of CSC, but I'm sure you could look it up on Google. But basically, it's kind of like what you would imagine in a high school with the ASB or the student body like council is. And Those organizations typically have such broad opportunities. They have a lot of things displayed as opportunities. And one of the things that I found very helpful were they had a financial, like finances and scholarship section, and they would send emails or give information about scholarships if you're worried about finances during your time in college. So that can help you financially, and that could be something you can put on your application. And I think there's just a lot of students associated with big student orgs like that are very associated with the school. And so from there, you can find a lot of resources. And then lastly, I didn't use this when I was in college, but I think it would have really helped. They have a writing workshop center, and I believe they help you walk through writing anything under the sun. They'll help you edit, they'll help you like brainstorm and go through everything. And when it comes time for your application, that could be something that could be a very valuable resource when you're having to write so many things like your personal statement, your work and activities, pre-writing your secondaries. So definitely utilize those resources on campus.
Ooh, just wanted to add, I know I put this something on the chat. I wish I utilized this more when I was like an undergrad, but there's a organization called Me Mentor that I utilize heavily and I work with also after I graduated. It's a good place to find external internships as well as mentors in the health professions field as well. So there are different places that you can look even outside of your campus to find the resources that you will need to help support you on your path.
I think that's a perfect segue into the question I was gonna, the next question I was gonna ask, which was, how did you find opportunities for research, internships, or volunteer work? Yeah, feel free to either pass or expand on this question.
For myself, I was in a pre-health organization that had a lot of different programs under that organization. So, there was teaching, there was instructing BLS CPR courses, there was community service. So I found like a big organization that served as an umbrella for a lot of different programs that I could involve myself in. And through that, I was actually able to take on a lot of leadership roles and take initiative in those different things, especially as I became like third or fourth year. So that's how I found opportunities for just volunteer, community service, anything like that. The other way that I did it was just cold scrolling through Google and like the UCLA list of organizations, just kind of went through all of them, pick and chose which ones I really thought aligned with my interests, and I would send them an email, or I would ask some friends if they knew anything about that, and they'll probably tell you the honest truth of if that organization is worth dedicating your time to. And then for research, I think this is the hardest one to really find a good research mentor. I would really rely on your peers and colleagues and upperclassmen who may be leaving their research position, may know some people in the lab, and kind of direct you, because there's so many research projects on campus. It's kind of hard to know which one will fit what you want to do. Like if you want to do straight up bench work, there's probably a lot of things for that. But if you're not into bench work and you want to do more clinical work, that might be a little bit more difficult to find, or have clinicians like on board undergraduate students and things like that. So just ask around, or even cold email, and send them your CV, send them an email, definitely demonstrating your interest in their laboratory, why you want to work with them, what skills you have to offer, things like that.
For me, for like internships or like volunteer work, what I would do is I would just be like a member in a lot of different various organizations, and the individual or those organizations would eventually like send out newsletters. So I would scour the newsletters. I'd make a basically Excel spreadsheet of different internships that would particularly interested me, and then I would just direct contact. I'd look up the internship or look up the website and find out like who the individual was to contact, and I'd set up like informational interviews to learn more about those internships or volunteer works that I was particularly interested in. And then additionally, what I would do is I would just talk to as many people as possible, let them know like, hey, if if you are honest and open about like what your particular interests are, you'll find that that'll open a lot more opportunities and doors for you. And so just going to like pre-health conferences, like the UC Davis pre-health conference or the Stanford SUMA conference, just going in there and just talking to people. And I found that, as I told people my story, I talked to them, the opportunities and the doors opened up, and then they would connect me with somebody who knew somebody. And to be honest, one of the best pieces of advice that I got is either you network or you don't work, because that ends up being a very good way to open up opportunities and doors that weren't open to you in the beginning. You'll find in your professional journey.
Yeah, I totally agree with the sentiment about networking. I feel like things tend to snowball. Like, I feel like the hardest part is starting, like establishing your initial network, but then I don't know, the more connections you make, the more connections you find too. Yeah, like here, and honestly, a lot of the opportunities that I had as an undergrad too, I learned from other students like that were leaving that position or who had done that, opportunity before, and they recommended it to me. So don't be scared to talk to your peers. Don't be scared to, like um think about these things that you're interested in doing and see, has anyone done anything similar, or yeah, I don't know. Talking to your peers, I think, is a very good that was like a very big source of opportunity for me. And then maybe on a similar topic, how did you find opportunities for shadowing and clinical experiences? And I know oftentimes this can be particularly hard, for first gen students who might not have family in healthcare, etc. So do you have any advice there?
I just want to go back and make a comment about that networking piece. I think it's very important to also like organize your network. So I still do this to this day. Like I have an Excel spreadsheet of all of my different network contacts, and where I stratify about like where I met them, when I met them, because it's always good to remind individuals and prime them, be like, hey, I met you at this conference, or hey, I met you at this workshop. And if you start keeping track, you'll find that it's a good habit as you progress in your career. So you can look back and be like, whoa, I met all these people like in this 1 year, or even in this 1 month doing this. But just to answer the question about shadowing and clinical opportunities, for me personally, it just went back to creating those particular opportunities. Like one of my most memorable shadowing experiences was where I worked or I shadowed at what's it called now? Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital in their pulmonary critical care department. And the way I got that was through my network. I was basically taking a Wing Chun class, and I was telling this guy that I was working with, like, hey, I'm interested in becoming a doctor one day. And what I didn't know is this man worked at LinkedIn, and he was like, hey, oh, make a LinkedIn page. That helps out significantly, and always have like a CV or resume ready to send to anybody, like a stock one that you have for yourself. But then this man sent out like my LinkedIn page and my CV and resume, and I got hits from pulmonary critical care attendings at Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital. Ended up getting a 1 week shadowing experience, and then I ended up, being able to share that opportunity and creating a program that's still embedded within the biology scholars program today called BICEP that lets other individuals shadow there in the pulmonary critical care department. But the the lesson in that is you'll be surprised. Like I said, just share your story with individuals, and you won't you won't know what comes out of it unless you just do that. But that's just one thing. Like networking was very important for me in obtaining those opportunities, and just like I said, talking to people.
I think shadowing as an undergrad at UCLA is very difficult because I think Reagan put like some restrictions to undergrads volunteering because something had happened and now they're not letting people do it. I don't know if that's still the case, but that's what I heard a few years back. So I think the best loophole around this is what I mentioned earlier is starting off as a volunteer so that you are able to access that space, with your ID and you're able to be there just surrounded by healthcare professionals. And then from there, you can take initiative to um, see a doctor or see a nurse or anybody and ask if they're willing to have you follow them around for an hour or two or whatever it may be. And the worst I can say is no. And I know everyone says that but I think most people are really shy to even ask that because the doctors always seem so busy. They're speed walking through the unit, all that. But I think in honoring yourself and your experiences and working to build your application, and whether you really want to pursue medical school or not, you really need to push forward and just ask, just do it. I think I didn't do that enough back then, and I wish I had. But once I finally developed the courage to do so, that's actually where I got a lot of shadowing hours. And then through a research project that I was on, I was doing some quality improvement initiatives in the clinic. And so I spent a lot of time with attending physicians there. And then that gave me more one-on-one relationship with these physicians so that I could ask if I could come into their clinic for a little bit. Whereas if you go straight through the Reagan, like UCLA Health Volunteer Office, they'll just tell you no, like you can't shadow a physician. Whereas if you know somebody, you ask if you can come in 2 to 3 hours on a given day, maybe they'll say yes. So I would say go about it that way.
Also, just to add, I would highly suggest that you cold email folks and try to set up informational interviews to learn more about, what their particular career pathway is, and that could definitely be your in. You could just be like, hey, I'm currently an undergrad at so and so institution. I realized you're like an orthopedic surgeon, and I'm interested about orthopedic surgery. Is there a way I could schedule like a 15 to 20 minute conversation with you to discuss your pathway? A lot of times you may get no responses, but you only really need like one or two people, and that could be your potential in. And so that's one of the ways that you could potentially do that professionally, aside from like, trying to see them in the hospital. But you'd be surprised, like folks will respond to that.
Sorry to circle around so much, but while I was listening to you guys, I remembered a story that happened to me as an undergrad. So as an undergrad, it's just like at the beginning, or like sometime maybe at the end of freshman year, I went to Abercams, which is like a research conference for undergrads. And there I met this girl. She was a senior undergrad somewhere else. And then we were just talking and she was telling me about her research. And then she mentioned that she was currently applying to MD PhD programs. And I think that was one of the first places I'd ever heard of an MD PhD program. So this was at the beginning of undergrad. So then whatever, the conference was over, we went our separate ways. Like we weren't at the same undergrad. And then fast forward, I ended up applying MD PhD. And then I interviewed at a place where I was set up. So when you interview for med school, a lot of times the school will coordinate having like a student host that maybe you can stay with. I don't know if the MD does that, but the MD PhD definitely does that. And I ended up interviewing at the school where this girl is currently an MD PhD, and she was my assigned student host. And we didn't realize, it felt like a parent trap moment, kind of, where we kind of like recognize each other. We were like, whoa, wait a minute. I remember you from like 4 years ago. You were telling me about MD PhD, and now I'm here interviewing at your school. So I guess here, this is just further like highlighting how important it is to mentor, not just with people who are already in the position you want to be in with your career, but just with older students, like other peers, your colleagues. They will, if you guys are on the same path, they will be your colleagues, like probably for the rest of your career. Like it's not uncommon that you'll run into people that you knew from undergrad again. So definitely make an effort to, talk to the community, like talk to the pre-med community. You'll be surprised what connections you can make. Sorry, I just remembered that story, and I don't think I've like told that story to anyone. That was kind of buried in the back of my head. We've been talking so much about mentorship. I was like, oh yeah, that happened to me. Okay. Cool. Maybe something more like also related to the application. which can be a little bit, at least this was really scary for me. How did you choose letter writers, and how did you ask them for letters of rec for med school applications? I struggled with this a lot.
I chose letter writers based on, I touched on this a little bit earlier about how I built strong relationships with professors or mentors that I had common interests in, or that I spent a lot of my time really understanding their work or their class, simply because I was interested in it or I was doing well. I was a phi-sci major at UCLA, and honestly, my undergraduate or my prereq courses, I wasn't all that enthused. And then once I started my upper division phi-sci classes, I found them so interesting. I took a lot of electives, and there was this one professor that was really passionate about his work with flies. And just because of his passion, he was a really great professor, and that kind of inspired me to go to his office hours and chat with him, not only about his research in the class, just about many other things. And we built a close relationship based on that. And I did my best to do well in his class, because at that point I was like, oh, maybe he could be a letter writer for me. It seems like we get along. He knows me now. I go to his office hours. We have a good relationship. But then if you're not doing well in that class, for example, it's kind of hard to ask. So also do well in the course that for the professor you're going to ask. So just finding something you're interested in, just like show that you're dedicated, show that you're passionate, and that you do your work. Um, and then in terms of other mentors, if you have research mentors or clinicians that you shadow, same thing applies. I think in anything that you do, if you're going to ask a letter writer to write you a strong letter of recommendation, it should be somebody that has seen your work ethic, that has seen your passion, and that you're a good person and that you're eager to learn. If you can show that general quality about yourself to anybody, I'm sure they would be happy to write a letter for you. Um, and then get letters of rec for, yeah, I think that answers the question.
For me personally, you know, I always say for letters of recommendation or references for jobs, you want to get somebody that knows you really well. I always, tell folks like, if you're not on my cell phone, I don't have your number. I'm not gonna ask you for a letter of recommendation or a job reference. And so that just goes back to how important it is to build very meaningful relationships. I know it may be hard as an undergrad to try to find somebody, you're trying to find, say, a science professor to write you, a really strong letter of recommendation, and it may seem like a very, high order task. But for me personally, I took multiple gap years or glide years or growth years. I'm not sure what the particular terminology is for that. And I realized, like, hey, I reached back out to those particular professors who, I had an undergrad who I really liked their class, and it was very surprising. They treat you a lot differently after you graduate. They don't see you as an undergrad trying to finagle whatever grade that you want. And like I said, I reached back out. I was like, hey, I graduated so and so. I took your class here. Is it cool if we set up like a 15, 20-minute meeting, just update you about where I'm currently at? I really like your class. And yeah, that's kind of how I built that particular rapport. But that's if you're, you got to play, trying to play like the long game in a way. But it just inadvertently happened in that particular scenario. But for just I guess the core of that is to choose individuals who know you really well, not the individuals who have a name brand name, right? For especially for your science letters of recommendation, you want to have someone speak to your characteristics, your work ethic. Maybe you didn't do so well in that particular class, but you showed up to every single office hours and you showed dedication and you showed improvement. That could speak volumes about your personal characteristics that, you know, can shine very well on a reference or a letter of recommendation.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask another potentially loaded question. How did you navigate the rest of the application process, such as drafting essays, selecting schools to apply to, interviewing, etc.? Was being first gen a part of your med school application, or did you not mention that anywhere?
For me, I mentioned that everywhere on my application. It was for me, it was very important to build a team of individuals who would support me through the medical school application process. I know that it's very hard to work on these things by yourself. And I mean, navigating the rest of the application process. For me personally, I was working full time while also trying to apply to medical school and do all the MCAT stuff. And so I think it was very crucial to, like I said, build a team, find individuals who are willing to support you in, multiple and different ways. And yeah, I think that answers the particular question. It's very broad, I guess. So if there's any specifics about that, feel free to ask.
For me, I don't feel that I navigated the application process very well. I think I did a lot of things last minute, simply because I didn't know. I had so many questions and I was kind of scrambling to get answers and get everything in order. And thankfully it worked out. But I think to answer this question is to tell you what I wish I had done. And I wish I had found anybody who had gone through the application process, had them walk me through it. What does the application site even look like? What are the different entries? What does the application form look like when there's a PDF printout so you know what you have to put in? And just knowing the different things that comprise the application very early on will prime you so that you're not scrambling towards the end and now it's June and you're trying to submit early but you can't because your application's not up to par or up to your standards. So I would say plan very early ahead and you don't necessarily hold on. You don't necessarily have to like do all the things, just plan it out. Like if you're in your second year, um put out your like calendars and then write like each month or like each time. Oh, sorry. Let me just close my window. Okay. Like in a given period, let's say from April to June, I'm going to work on my personal statement draft. And at these time points, I'm going to start asking for feedback. In May, I'm going to start working on my work and activities. And these aren't the months specifically that I'm telling you. I'm just telling you to plan ahead. And same thing with asking for your letters from letter of recommendation writers. Just being early in that because all of a sudden those people are going to be writing a lot of letters and maybe they'll say no to you if you ask too late and it happened to be someone you're very close to or something like that. So just plan ahead. And then in terms of being first gen, I don't know if I specifically mentioned it, but it was very clear that I had this background and that influenced a lot of the organizations that I was a part of. A big part of my application was mentoring and tutoring and teaching. And this was all because I didn't have that as a first gen individual. And so I think it was kind of implied, but I don't think I mentioned it specifically.
Yeah, I feel when I was applying, I feel very, very lucky and grateful that I had a friend who applied the cycle before me and he was willing to share his application with me. That was extremely generous of him and it helped me so much. Like even as Janice was saying, even just with familiarizing myself with what the application was going to potentially look like, what are some of the things that I might have to be writing about. So that was incredibly helpful for me, and I definitely paid it forward and shared my application with a few friends of mine who applied the cycle after me. So this might be not super easy to come across, but if you have any, friends who already went through this process or anyone who might be willing to share maybe even just pieces of their application with you, that would be incredibly helpful. I found that extremely helpful. And then I also agree with the point that was mentioned that you should make it a habit to sort of update your CV and your resume, like maybe at the end of every quarter, just to keep track of all the things that you've done or that you will be doing, because it is so hard to go back and think like to the past 4+ years, like what did I do? When did I do it? What did I learn? So honestly, I think the most helpful way to keep track of all this is to just update your CV. And you never know, like you might have to hand that out to people on like very quickly, like, and then you always have it updated and you always have it ready. So I think it's a win-win. So I would highly recommend doing that. Okay.
Just to add to that,
Yeah,
that does not stop even when you're in medical school. Like you keep track of all the things that you've done, and it's a good habit to start building now as opposed to, waiting and then having to do that when there's a time crunch.
definitely. I'm still giving out my CV to to people all the time. Cool. Um, okay, I think maybe we can end on like one more question. Um, more like basic questions. So do you have any advice to give on prioritizing like self-care and mental health during the pre-med journey? Just like what did you do to stay sane, like during the pre-med journey and also maybe even during the application process? And this can be especially tricky if you don't have like anyone who knows what you're going through, like to talk to about this stuff.
Um, this is a piece of advice I gave to a mentee I met on this platform. She was saying that she was juggling a lot of things on her plate, as many pre-meds do, and that's definitely something that I resonate with too. Now and back then, it's just I feel like there's a mountain worth list that of things that you need to do every day, and it can be very overwhelming. It can definitely cause burnout and affect your mental health. And I wish someone had told me this, but for a tangible tip that I would say is when you have a huge list of things that you need to do, prioritize what needs to be done urgently and needs to be done that day. So do all those things and don't push it off. Discipline yourself to make sure you do all those urgent tasks that day and then move on to the next kind of priority of tasks. Um, and then the only things you truly, truly need to do during a given day is those urgent tasks that maybe have like deadlines, you have a test coming up and you need to study for it. You have maybe something you need to organize for an org you're a part of and you need to do that this week. Do that during a given day. And then set a time limit for yourself in the day, kind of a boundary for yourself to not, I guess, overstep. Then that has to be your non-negotiable. And sometimes it's not going to work out. Like sometimes you just have like 3 finals next week and you just got to study and sometimes you're not going to get the sleep and you're going to have to do that. But most days set that non-negotiable for yourself because if you don't put that boundary in place, you're just going to keep working. You're just going to keep doing all the things that you feel like you have to do. And then it's just going to creep up on your mental health. And before you know it, you're going to feel burnt out. And I think a lot of people underestimate the impact that that has on people. So just set that ahead for yourself to make sure that you're not overstepping and putting too much on your plate and doing the things that are absolutely necessary to protect yourself, to allow yourself to have self-care hours like after 9 or 10 or whatever, and to protect your mental health too, because that a good mental space is what will allow you to continue this journey. So
Let's see, advice. For me, I think one of my favorite shows is a show called Better Call Saul, and one of the main characters has he has a quote. He says, "Perfection is the enemy of the perfectly adequate." And so, as pre-med students, I know that we always try to strive for perfection. We try to get the best top grades. And what happens is, as you strive for that, I feel that, you lose, I would say, like that part of yourself who kind of forgets like why you're doing this in the first place. And so what I would say as a piece of advice is that work on progression, not perfection. Understanding and giving yourself grace each day that, you may not have set out and done all the goals that you wanted to do, but understand that, each step forward towards, what you believe is, a positive step towards your goal is a step. regardless of how minuscule. So don't underestimate the power of like a small act. Even just so I woke up, took a shower, brushed my teeth. If you're having a bad time, right? That's a good way to think about these particular things. Like small things add up, right? And the other thing is understanding that you have a multitude of different identities that make up who you particularly are. You're not just, don't make I'm a pre-med or, student as your central focus. Think about what got you to where you currently are. Like what other identities that you hold that gives you, personal happiness and what you feel brings value to your life. Look for answers outside of just classes. And you'll find once you step back and you take a look at these things, you'll find those particular answers and they'll come to you. It doesn't have to be anything that's particularly forced. And so, yeah, I guess it ultimately comes down to, focus on your why. And once you have that down, it's something that you could always turn back to and gain strength from, especially when you're going through these hard times. And also understand that reflection is key, right? You go through a lot of things, but sometimes we don't even take the opportunity to pause and understand all of the activities, all the things that we've done, even in a particular day. So take the time to take a break. For me, personally, I try to meditate even as little as 3 to 5 minutes every single day. And yeah, so that is my particular advice for that question.
That was awesome advice. I'm not very good at remembering quotes, but I do like one that has to do with like you eat an elephant one bite at a time or something like that. Like, even like this grand task, all grand tasks need to be done like piece by piece, like step by step. But okay, I think we can go ahead and wrap up this session. Thank you so much to our awesome panelists for, participating and sharing your experiences and your knowledge with us over this past hour. And thank you so much to all the attendees who joined us live and to all of those, to those of you who asked us questions live. It was always great. We love answering them. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording. I hope you all have a great rest of the week. And yeah, hope to see you soon sometime.
Bye, everyone. Thank
Good evening,
you.
everybody.
Bye.